Welcome, everybody. I hope lunch was good. That was a great awards ceremony as well. Welcome to Implementing Quality Online Learning Leaders Share Insights and Advice. So I want to get an idea who's in the audience today. How many of you are administrators? Okay, faculty and IDs, other DL staff, educational technologists, so a pretty even mix. Okay, so we have a panel of experts here today. My name is Bethany Simunich. I'm QM's Director of Research and Innovation. And like I said, I'm joined by a lot of expertise in this room. And I'll first have them introduce themselves very briefly. So Shannon.
Hi, my name is Shannon Rege. I serve as Executive Director of Academic Programs and Learning Innovation for Oregon State University's eCampus and serve on the Quality Matters Academic Advisory Committee and Board.
And hi, I'm Valerie Kelly. I am Associate Vice President at Kent State University for Kent State Online. And I'm delighted to be here and looking forward to this.
And I'm Karen Rege. I'm the Dean of Online Learning and Media Services at the Community College of Philadelphia. Yes, my last name really is pronounced like reggae, like the music, and I am a musician. Please don't make no jokes about it. And I am also on the Quality Matters Board.
Wonderful. Thank you. So as people continue to trickle in, and for those of you that are at home, we're talking about implementing quality assurance because we know that it's difficult. And we know that to do it well and to do it right and to have it sustaining at your institution, you need to have some crucial campus conversations and you need to make a plan. So I thought all of you would love to hear from people who have already done a lot of this work and have been very successful at it at their institution. So the first question I'd like to ask all of you, what are the first 1 to 3 steps that you would recommend to chief online officers who are creating a plan for quality assurance implementation or who are revisioning their goals and plan in light of the post-pandemic demand? Shannon, you want to start?
Sure, happy to start. I think the first step I would recommend would be to adopt standards and specifically the Quality Matters rubric, of course, or some version of those, and to make sure that those are communicated out to all of the different stakeholders that are involved. The second I would say would be to invest in instructional design staff. They are just so impactful and make such an incredible difference in your ability to deliver quality online education experiences. I've got two more things I would say. One is to have a strong Quality Matters coordinator, but also not to put all of your eggs in that one basket and kind of distribute your Quality Matters engagement across your staff and get as many folks involved as you can. And finally, if you're speaking to your chief online operating officer, they probably have growth in mind, and growth depends on quality. You can't sustain growth without quality.
Well, I would say the 3 things, just like any kind of strategic plans or backward design, to start with, where are we now? What are we going to, let's examine our university and really understand what type of university we have, what role we have. The second thing is like, where are we now and where do we want to be? So really looking at understanding what our goals are, understanding how we're going to get there. And then the last part of that is how are we going to get there? How are we going to make this plan? So just backing up, where are we now? So for instance, Kent State University, it's a large public R1 university with 35,000 students, 8 campuses, a very strong faculty governance. We have RCM, which is responsibility centered management, which means our colleges are quite independent, not totally, but they have their own, they have their own identity and make their own have their own way of doing things. So within that kind of structure, how do we do this? Well, we have a very strong centralized unit of instructional designers. Kent State invested in distance learning and instructional design over 25 years ago. And that obviously helped us tremendously when the pandemic came, because we have not only a centralized group of instructional designers, but instructional designers in each unit. So where we are now is that, and then where we want to be is looking at coming to things like Quality Matters Conference. What are our peer institutions doing? What are aspirational institutions doing? What's on the horizon? Where do we want to be? What's reasonable? How do we get there? Well, there's a lot of different ways to do that. But one of the big things that we have to do about how do we get there is build upon what we've already done, right? So I think typically in universities, no matter where you are, and everybody's in a different place, no matter where you are, you've done a lot already. And so to make sure that you acknowledge that, occasionally give yourself a pat on the back, because I don't think we do that enough. And then to say, okay, building on that, where can we go? Looking ahead, looking where we want to go, and how do we get there then? And then I'll talk a little bit later too about really aligning with knowing where you are, what your university goals are.
And I'm in agreement with Val. I have a lot of the similar approaches, although mine is somewhat tied to my personal story. So I haven't been in online learning all that long, only about 7 years now. And I had the privilege of starting out at one of the institutions that was part of Maryland Online, which is the founding institution for Quality Matters. So I got to walk in as a new director and work with a team that had been in place and doing online learning for a long time and had a really robust system in place for quality assurance. And I moved institutions this past February, and I'm now at a large public or large community college, inner city, urban area. And their implementation of Quality Matters and their quality assurance process is a little less robust, mostly because of the organizational structure, which we can talk about a little bit later. Their online learning department was under a completely different vice president and wasn't with the academic affairs until last summer. And so when I came in, I took a very similar approach. I started assessing and analyzing of the sort of the landscape. And so two of the things that I used, two of the tools that I used were the CEQA. And if you haven't heard about it, I believe CEQA was from 2017, is it? 16. Deborah Dare had written an article, the continuum of excellence in quality assurance. So I urge you to take a look at that, but it talks about where an institution might be on the framework. So are you just doing ad hoc work with Quality Matters and quality assurance, or have you demonstrated it, or are you actually leveraging it and doing benchmarking? So where in that sequence are you? So we took a look at that and did a little bit of analysis around that. And then also more recently, we've been having some discussions at the board, at least around a sort of framework which we call the landscape, which is actually developed by Bethany here. And so that looks at the overall picture of an online learning implementation, everything from the stakeholders to the policies and procedures. It's the whole kit and caboodle. And so we actually took some time with my team, my new team, in analyzing where are we? And so that's exactly where we started looking at data. And then from there, my second point would be to engage the faculty, because the faculty are really strong players, and without their support, you can't implement quality assurance. So we started talking and listening, more importantly, to what they had to say. What were their needs for professional development? What did they want to see in a quality assurance process? What had they already identified as issues? And how do we solve those? And are we going to put in policies at the department level or the institutional level? So these are some of the conversations that we've been having. And then finally, I think you also have to look at the top-down approach too. And I was so happy to hear Rachel Brooks's presentation earlier, where they were talking about how in NCCU, they had already put the online learning into the strategic plan. And I think having those conversations about where does quality fit in the institutional strategic plan is really important. And so getting the CAO on board right away is another direction I'd head.
Great. I'm jotting down notes as y'all are talking so we can have some summary takeaways. All right. All right, our next question. What are some crucial aspects of supporting quality assurance implementation that online leaders should give more thought to? What are one or two things that were crucial to making your own implementation successful?
Yeah, I think having an actual implementation plan is really important with specific goals. How many courses do you want to certify in a year? Set that target early so that you know when you're hitting it or know when you're not. you want to be able to report out on your progress as well along the way.
Mhm.
And, you mentioned celebrating successes, patting ourselves on the back for, supporting is great. But really celebrating the faculty and their commitment to quality is really important. So even little things like when a course is certified, sending an email of congratulations to the faculty member and copying their dean, their department head, all the way up the chain, and really explaining what it is the faculty member has accomplished in doing this certification, and what it really means, and making sure that that's understood all the way up the chain is really, really important. I think another thing, as a program, an online program grows, it's important to balance the initial development and the quality that goes into that initial development of a course or program. But it's equally important to maintain that over time. And so it's not a one and done kind of affair. You have to keep revisiting those courses. At Oregon State, we have a guideline that courses are redeveloped every 3 to 5 years. So it gives me just, a metric that I can use in talking to departments and say, hey, it's time to come back and redevelop. And I guess finally, I would say, don't ever waste a crisis or what can feel like a crisis, squeeze the most out of it that you can. And so just a couple of examples of that. One is we migrated learning management systems several years ago. This, if you've ever been involved in that, it's great in the end and everything, but while you're in it, it's hard work. So one of the things that we did was, we're moving every single class. So we decided if we move it, we improve it every single class. And so we created a QM template. And as we migrated courses, some of them were old and hadn't really been infused with QM goodness yet. And we infused them, and it made a huge difference in the overall quality across the board. I'll stop there.
So yeah, critical aspects. I would say I'm going to get a little bit esoteric first, and then I'll get down to a little bit more practical. But I think one of the things when we talk about quality, it's a tough concept. It's intangible. How do we define it? What does it mean at all of our institutions? How do we assure it when sometimes it's really hard to even say what this is, So Potter Stewart was famously a Supreme Court justice. When they were trying to discuss and describe pornography, they couldn't come up with a definition, and he ended up saying, well, I know it when I see it. So I think there is some aspect to that with when we're talking about quality assurance, that we know quality when we see it, but it's sometimes really hard to communicate that. It's hard to get to say to everybody, this is exactly what it means. So we have that is something that's really we have to work at, because the communication, knowing the community we're in, really identifying with them and getting them to identify with us is critically important. I would say also quality, when we talk about it, is contextual. So if it's, for instance, most of us flew in here on jets, and that jet engine, when we talk about quality assurance for that, we want that to be precise and detailed, and we don't want anything to not be able to be reduced completely as it was done the first time, right? But when we're talking about education, that's just not the case, right? So we have different perspectives on what is quality at a certain time. So for instance, even if we were to talk about the wonderful food we have here, say, what is quality food? Here we would have this image of quality ingredients and even presentation, all the things. But if we had a peanut allergy, quality assurance would be no peanuts. That's the quality assurance we want. So, so I think when we're talking about quality assurance in education, we really need to understand that education is dynamic. It's, when we're dealing with creative people, it is not easy to completely define, what is a quality experience in a class. However, we can do a lot of things. I mean, we do know best practices. We do have frameworks from Quality Matters that has Quality Matters in other places, but Quality Matters has been extremely helpful for most of our universities to be able to communicate that sense of quality, to be able to put some definition around what quality is and to get that across to people. So we use quality matters in a lot of different ways at our university. We use it just as a general framework, as basic design. Sometimes we get people, if we can get them to get some basic fundamental quality pieces in there, we're kind of happy. Other places, like I said, our colleges have different identities. They have different ways of doing things. I'm going to embarrass at least one of the director of instructional design from public health. Jamie, just raise your hand. She's not raising it very high. But, and I don't know if Amy Grinswich is here, because those are two colleges we have that they have quite defined accreditation standards. So we were able to do like more as far as course quality matters and program quality matters, getting things certified and having money, more of those. Other colleges, we can't do that, but we can do a lot of things. So I think being flexible, understanding it matters where you are and who you're talking to. And I don't want to go on too long. I have other things, but I'm going to pass this along.
Okay, so as we're looking at the quality landscape overall, one of the things that we've talked about a lot is implementing top down and bottom up at the same time. So engaging those faculty from the very beginning in the conversations around policies, around what is quality, and professional development needs and things like that, but then also engaging the senior management people as well as other parts of the institution. So for example, your marketing and communications folks, and helping you get the message out. So there's a lot of different opportunities that you have and you can leverage different parts of the institution, both above and below you, as if you're working as a COO, and I would encourage you to do that. We also talked a lot about policies versus initiatives. So is it the carrot versus the stick? How do we engage the faculty? Are we going to put in a lot of heavy policies? And I can tell you that's also contextual, right? Because for us, we have a very strong collective bargaining agreement. And if we try to tell our faculty what they're going to do, there will be all kinds of grievances happening right away. All right, I'm seeing some head nods in the room here. Yes. And so we're trying to figure out, okay, what carrots can we offer instead? And sometimes, the financial carrot works great, but at a community college, we don't always have the funding available to do that. So how can we think creatively to come up with some carrots or to put in some policies that might work? And how we're doing that is we're engaging the faculty in the policy development itself and saying, okay, we need to address this issue. How do you want to do this? Put it on the table and let's talk about it. So that's one of the approaches that we're taking. But to go back to the original question about what are one of the things that we really need for supporting implementation, and I would say data. I know Bethany's going to give me the thumbs up, but I came in, newly at this position in February. And the first thing I asked my staff is, okay, so what are the statistics on this? And what are the statistics on that? And they're just looking at me. And then they're telling me, okay, we need another instructional designer. And I'm like, okay, we probably do, but how do you know that? What's your data? How many interactions are you doing with faculty on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis? At what point in the year? How long are these transactions taking place? So I told them, I said, look, I can go to bat for you and go to senior management and request to get another instructional designer, but they're going to say, how do you know? What's the data? So that's what I'm asking you. So as a COO, you really have to understand what type of data you're collecting and how you're going to use that data. And so we've had a lot of conversations around what to collect, and we're looking at nationally, what are the best practices in data collection. So we're working through that. We're dividing it up based on 3 areas. One, what is student data, student outcome data? What is course level data, like the number of sections and things like that we might need for compliance, and then operations data. So again, how many interactions are we having, LMS things, pieces like that. So using the data, I think, is really important to maintain and support an implementation.
Wonderful. Okay. So I have a final question here that I'm going to ask them, and then we're going to open it up to questions from you. So this is your opportunity. Tap their collective expertise. All right. What is your most important lesson learned or top recommendation for successful implementation? What would you do differently if you were starting from scratch?
Sure. So, someone mentioned earlier about engaging faculty, and I think that is the most important thing. And making it as easy as possible on the faculty. They really do have a lot on their plates, and they're pulled in a lot of different directions. I'm at an R1 institution too. So the faculty have many different obligations that they have to fulfill. And I guess the other part of that would be that when you're working with faculty and you encounter some resistance, has anybody ever worked with? No, okay, it's not long.
No.
Okay, just checking.
I don't believe that at all.
Okay.
No.
But I think it's important to recognize that many times, maybe even almost always, that faculty resistance comes from a place of caring about quality and a worry that, am I going to be able to do this in a quality way, the way that I've been able to do on campus? And so if you lead with quality and set that as your shared goal, you're halfway there by that point.
I agree with that 100%. I mean, I think we've all dealt with difficult faculty, but being empathetic and really understanding where they're coming from is incredibly important in this. I'd like to say that it's, one of the main things to take away is that it's hard. It's hard to do quality in anything, but especially in online. It's new. And trying to implement that takes time and it takes patience. And that is one of the hardest lessons to learn. I think that we go into these things and we're passionate about it and we want to do all the things and we want to do all the things right now and we can see how to do them. We know how to do them. If somebody would just listen to us, we could get it all done, but it doesn't work that way. And we're in a system and it's complex and it's dynamic and we don't control very much. I don't control anything. I mean, it's just, it's a situation where you're working with people, you have to collaborate. It's so important. If you can build up that collaboration, if you can get that goodwill, that's really the only way to get things done. You can't make people do things. I mean, I have 4 boys. It's like, you cannot make people do things. So, so going back to that, I think one of the things that Quality Matters did really, really well a long time ago is that they bit off a little piece. And they said, we're not going to just say, this is how to do online design and development and teaching and all the things. They said, we're going to concentrate on design. We're going to concentrate on courses originally, and then design. Something that wasn't so threatening. We weren't going in and saying, hey, this is how to teach your course better. You've been doing it wrong all the time. And so now we'll teach you how to do it better. But by concentrating on design, because it was a new medium, that wasn't so threatening. That was something that people could latch onto and say, yeah, all right, you're right. I've never done this before. I'm not that threatened by this. So that was a really good place. And just like, when you're doing instructional design and you chunk things up and you make things easily attainable, you can't do everything at once or put the huge goal out there, or people just get disillusioned and they can't latch onto it. So I think it really helped us. And at Kent State, we've been doing this for a very long time. We've been working with Quality Matters for a very long time. So we started with courses, and really everything we did was based on courses. And then it got bigger and it was programs. And we were really looking at, do these courses flow together? And the keynote today spoke to me very, very much, because that's right where we are right now, of just like, okay, but across the university, how do we do this? And the entire student experience, how do we do this? And it's incredibly important to be top down, bottom up. Where are we? I think we started off kind of in the middle and just tried to make it work both ways. Right now we're at a good juncture, and quite honestly, again, don't let a good crisis go to waste or whatever. Using the pandemic as an example, we have a lot of interest, right? There was a crisis. Out of a crisis, you can get opportunity. And in fact, when you're trying to change things at a traditional university, that's basically the only time you get people willing to change, so you have to use the opportunity. And so right now, we're doing all our strategic planning across the university. And for the first time, I've really been able to be at all those levels and make sure that what we're doing for our strategic plan is aligned with what academic affairs is doing. Academic affairs is obviously aligned with what the university is doing. But it's critical that you find those pathways, those alignments. Again, alignment. We have to be aligned with what the university is trying to do. We're very focused on student success right now. And then also the sense of belonging. So that we can work with, right? We can say across the board, how are we doing this with online if we don't look across the entire environment, all the processes, every place that the student is encountering Kent State? Do they feel like they belong? Do they feel like we care about their experience? It's got to be everything. We all have to be talking. We all have to be working together. So obviously, again, that's a big ask and a big plan, but we're getting there. That's now part of our strategic planning, and we feel more as an online unit, more a part of that big whole. So I'll leave it there.
Well, thank you. And I think I agree with both of you. I came up with very similar points, but just in a slightly different way. So I was thinking also about leveraging quality matters. And I think part of that is helping those faculty, particularly who are new to teaching online. So I know we had all these people who ended up online unwillingly during the pandemic, right? And then coming out of the pandemic, there's a lot who still want to teach online, but because they taught during the pandemic, they think they know what good course design is, right? And so it's challenging at this point to step back and say, yeah, well, that's not exactly what we've been using as a standard for quality course design. And that's a really tough conversation to have. So kudos to all UIDs out there who have to deal with that on a daily basis. And so helping the faculty understand the reason and the benefits of using some kind of quality assurance framework is really helpful. And then also, I think I was thinking the same thing about adopting a quality assurance mindset that's woven throughout the institution, woven into everything that you do. And here's an example for you. I have a wonderful and very innovative president who has decided that we are going to do high flex. I hear some groans in the room here. Yes. So high flex is really, really challenging, right? Because it takes a lot of skills, both in terms of the design and the technology and the classroom management. So for me, the conversation is really, okay, how are we going to weave quality into that, right? So it's got to go into everything we do, from the delivery of the student support services, like we heard in the keynote this morning, into these new initiatives that are coming out, and then obviously in the daily operations. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here, but it's challenging to get the mindset of quality assurance, and especially if you're using quality matters as your framework, to get it woven into the institution. It does take a very long time to do that, but those institutions who are more successful in sustaining their online programs with high quality are the ones who most often have woven it throughout the institution.
Absolutely. Wonderful responses, y'all. All right, let me give some summary points, and then hopefully you all have some good questions as well. So I think we heard some themes there. One of those is really first understanding your institutional context. Implementing quality assurance, just like designing a high quality course, there is no single pathway that is going to work for everybody at every institution. So look at your own institution, look at your institutional context, look at your institutional culture. Also look to your strategic plan that your institution has. See where your goals for online student success really marry with the goals that your institution already has. Chances are very high they already have metrics and goals for student success, right? So you're there to help with the online learners as well. So make sure that they understand that you are in a support role for their goals, for meeting their goals as an institution. Listen to faculty and recognize their efforts. So a lot of conversations here about gaining buy-in, respecting where faculty are, understanding their objections, and really approaching them in ways where you're offering support. So definitely more carrots than sticks. We also heard top down and bottom up, and top down and bottom up. So a lot of the research that we're doing right now in quality assurance implementation, it shows us that by and large, top down initiatives only are ineffective and they are not as long lasting as initiatives that really include everybody at the institution from the beginning. So that leads to this idea of, are you having crucial campus conversations with all of your stakeholders? Are you starting with faculty? Are you including your instructional designers in all of these conversations? And to the point of the keynote in the panel this morning, are you elevating the work of instructional designers so that faculty understand what they do and respect what they do and see them as collaborative partners? So I've served in the role of faculty, I've served in the role of ID. And I'll tell you, when I was an ID and a faculty member came in and said, here's my flash drive, you're going to just upload it and make my course, right? I didn't feel like I was a part of the team in creating a quality course with them, right? So this also goes back to culture, right? Who needs to be included in that conversation from the beginning? And even if you're already on your journey, it's okay to go back to the beginning and say, maybe we need to convene a committee of stakeholders, including a student representative, at least one, to make sure that everybody has a voice in this quality conversation. We also heard a lot about how quality is hard because you can't define it. And it's contextual, and that's true. But I think, Val, to your good point, you do know it when you see it. So to me, that also says that I know you have faculty at your institutions who have developed high quality courses. Hold those faculty up, showcase their efforts, because sometimes when faculty see other examples, they can see their own courses, their own quality assurance future in those examples. Sometimes you just need to see what we're talking about, right? So for a faculty member that is newer to online or brand new to instructional design, IDs, they don't know maybe what a good course looks like. So elevate the faculty at your campus that are doing this exceptional work and recognize them. So we also heard, I think, very strongly that theme. So again, how many faculty in the room? All right, you're teaching, you have service that you need to do, you have committees that you're on, and then here I come in with these standards and say, redesign all your courses, right? Mm-hmm. It's a tough ask. Mm-hmm. Quality assurance is a marathon. It's not a sprint. This is a long journey. This is not something that's going to be completed in a year. So what are your goals? The panel also mentioned, start out with goals. And it could be incremental goals. We're going to start to offer professional development. We're going to support faculty in these ways, maybe by having LMS templates so they could design their courses within it and really concentrate on the pedagogical aspects. And you have the other things taken care of for them. Recognize their efforts, even if you can't do it financially. So can you write a letter for their file? Send to their dean? Can you celebrate them? I've heard several conversations now, food, cake, right? Champion them, showcase their efforts, spread it on social media because it's a lot of work and they deserve that recognition in that respect. All right. So that's a little bit of a summary, but I would love to hear from all of you. And for any of you that have questions, you can ask them from your seat, and then I'm going to repeat them for our folks at home so that they can hear them. Scott.
How do you distinguish between design and instruction? I think a lot of times communication between administration and faculty, those definitions get a little fuzzy. And what some people think instruction is, others think what's design, and vice versa.
Okay, so the question for the folks at home is, how do you distinguish between design and delivery or design and instruction, especially for faculty where very much face-to-face, those two things are merged. So then we move into online learning and we're saying, oh no, they're separate. That can be a very difficult and confusing conversation to have sometimes. Okay.
I'd love to address that one. We had a really strong start with Quality Matters informing our design, and we used the rubric in the design, and we felt, after some time and after we had a good foothold there, that we were just kind of letting the faculty go after that. It was like, okay, it's just a great design. And we felt like we needed more support. So at Oregon State, we developed online teaching principles, and they're research-based, and they are basically an extension of the Quality Matters rubric. But what it's helped us do is create a framework and just paint a picture for faculty. This is what good online teaching looks like. And we tried to model the QM rubric in doing that, in that we weren't super prescriptive. They're goals, but they can be met in many different ways. So they can fit all different kinds of courses. And then we made those available through Creative Commons. So they're openly available. But that is one way that we've tried to kind of bridge that between the design and facilitation. Because your design really sets you up for a specific kind of facilitation. These are not totally unrelated things. Like I always kind of picture it as kind of hands holding, they're interlaced. And so it's important to kind of have that follow through.
Add one thing, very much along those same lines. We had kind of a mantra that we use is design to teach. So the idea that you have to design for whatever teaching you're going to be doing. So that can vary very much, right? So the design of an online course has to reflect what's going to happen facilitate and enhance the teaching interactions that you want to have happen in that online course. So when we build our website, we did it design, build, teach. We might have moved beyond that now. At the time, we were really trying to make it clear that design is a very specific thing. Like this is something that has to happen at the beginning of this whole process. Design is something that must be done. The building, we were thinking more in terms of technology, because that's another whole piece. You have to learn to use this software, this LMS. And so thinking that there are these different elements of how we, of all the things that the faculty are going to have to do. So it really kind of called them out. Now, obviously it needs to be kind of seamless, but we were calling them out specifically just for that point, just to try to get across that there are these things that have to be done, and design is that important. And it's designing because teaching is its whole thing in and of itself. Whether or not something exists online, you still have to teach. And that part of it does get lost sometimes. So.
And we're right in the middle of that conversation right now. We strategically sent our department heads through APPQMR, and they came back and said to us, because they're the ones charged with evaluating the faculty, right? And they came back and said, we really have to do this. We have to evaluate the faculty on all of this. And so that became a little bit challenging to work through that discussion. And one of the things that we really focused on was in the Quality Matters rubric, the idea of faculty presence. What's the faculty presence look like in an online class? And that's what we looked at, that as delivery as opposed to some of the course design, and really making sure how the faculty is engaging. So what we do not want to see is professor publisher. So I know we've all seen those courses where the faculty member is tied into the publisher's content and only drops the link into the LMS and says, here's my online course. And it's like, no, the publishing material is great. And there's ways to deep link it in, and you need to think through that design better. So you need to have some instructor presence in that class. So that's how we've been distinguishing it.
Great. Question.
I think you want from the online world.
Absolutely.
If we move it, we improve it, is a great idea. But many faculty members don't have an internal need or desire to make changes without external incentives. How do you get faculty buy-in, but it will require more effort on their part?
Okay, so the question, just so everybody at home can hear, is how do you get faculty buy-in when essentially you're asking them for a lot more work on their part? So the idea of if we move it, we improve it is great, but what if faculty don't have the time or the inclination?
I think that's a great question. And we always say, faculty time is our most limited resource. And so that's something that's a reality we live in. And I think, part of the way that we try to mitigate against that is to acknowledge that how much work it is to develop an online course, and how much time it takes to get trained. And I remember, early on setting up these systems and, sitting around a conference table with, some department heads and lead faculty and my boss at the time, and getting the question, how long is this going to take? And I would be really blunt and say, it's going to take a lot of time. It's a lot of hard work. And I remember my boss kind of cringing like, oh, but that was the ticket. That was really it was important to be upfront about that and be realistic. And that also helped us really develop systems that helped us buy out faculty time. in order to allow time to do this deep work with us. And then following through on that and kind of showing, the impact of that. What is the difference in quality?
So the only thing I would add to that is that we did do some specific things. We did buy out faculty time that, again, part of that was in our collective bargaining agreement. So we had, there tends to be a time allotment for making an online course. From our unit, we did give monetary compensation for many course developments. We used that very, very strategically, that we had this whole contract and everything because that was one way we could get some control to say, we'll pay you if you do these things, if you work with an instructional designer. Some ways it seemed almost backwards because the instructional designer was doing a lot of the work. And then we were paying them, but not really, because the time and effort it took them to understand the process and what was involved was really what we were paying for. So that was, so we have done that, but it's a constant balancing act of, because obviously you can't continue to pay, forever for every course and for every single redesign and so forth. So, but we do find that once people get going, it does take less time once they're experienced in this. So if we can get the newcomers over that hurdle, we find that the model, there also is this incentive of the students drive it, because the really good courses, when they get to a course that's not so good, they complain. And so that's a lot of incentive for faculty to make their course good also.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I would say to the faculty, okay, so think about it from the student's perspective. Is this the course that you would want to take if you were a student in this class, right? So we do this ultimately for the students, and we have to invest that time. And it is a lot of time up front. But I can tell you, as Val was saying, the time goes faster the more you do it. And having the Quality Matters framework is a big help. And here's an example. Last summer 21, I was contacted by a president of a university in West Virginia and asked to teach an online course. And I got the course shell less than 48 hours before the course started. And I had to build the course from scratch. And if I had not had the Quality Matters framework in my head, it would have been a disaster. And so I was really able to build fairly quickly because I knew exactly what I needed to do. I needed to have my objectives, both at the module level, at the course level. I mean, all the way through, I had to have my assessments aligned. I could, put all these crosswalks in. I knew how to build content. I knew how to build interactivity. And so I was able to build fairly quickly. So yes, it is painful. It does take a long time the first time you do it, but the more you engage with this framework and the more you learn to build using that Quality Matters mindset, is what I was saying, the faster it is.
And then you hear faculty who have gone through this say, I'm using Quality Matters in my on-campus course too. I don't know if I'm supposed to be doing that, but it actually impacts, my course design there too.
Interestingly enough, we have data on that, Shannon. So
I know.
yeah, it's a very high percentage, over 90% of faculty that engage in QMPD or engage as a peer reviewer. They not only take that information back to their own online course, but they take it back to their face-to-face course. And to me, this was something that was very important during the pandemic, because you had so many faculty saying, well, now I have to invest my time in this PD workshop for online learning, and I'm never going to teach online after this is over. Trust me. But you know what you learn in those workshops? You learn about good instructional design, good foundational instructional design, and that's applicable in any modality. The other point that I wanted to reiterate here, because I think it's important and it's too often overlooked, where is the student voice in your work? So if you have courses at your campus and some are exceptional and some really need a lot of help, and you're not getting some traction there for those that need a lot of help, look to student feedback. And if you have to, purposefully gather student feedback, because at the end of the day, we are all here for that same one reason, to help students. Faculty want to help students. Your senior administration wants to help students. IDs, I know you want to help students. So let the students speak. When they have a good experience in a course and they say, this course was so easy for me to navigate, I could just concentrate on my learning. That could make a difference to your resistant faculty who think, why do I even need this? Why do I need to work with an ID? because it's to the benefit of the faculty and to you. Do you want to have reduced questions about where to find something so you could just concentrate on teaching? Yes, of course you do. All right. Any last questions? I got a tough one for them if you all don't have one. Okay, I'm going to ask my tough one.
Oh, please ask us a question.
So if you're starting this work now and you're a little bit new to quality assurance, but this is the first time maybe you're thinking of really creating an implementation plan, and you're looking to your institutional strategic plan, you're trying to set goals and marry those goals. How the heck do you approach creating a budget for this? Yeah, see, told you it was tough, but I get asked that a lot. So I'm going to ask the expert panel.
Yeah, it's tough. That is a really tough question. And thanks for the heads up on that, by the way.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah. You're welcome.
Budgets are value statements, right? So what you budget for and what you allocate your resources for, that's what you value. So when it is budgeting time of year, you're looking at we all have limited resources, right? Well, many of us do, most of us do probably. And so you just have to think about it, aligning your priorities and your budget. And if quality is your priority, then you really have to have budget behind it and resources behind it.
No, you've had to go through.
So right now, for example, we are working on a new strategic enrollment management plan. And one of the things that I've muscled my way into is a seat at the table. And the reason is most institutions, I think, are right now struggling. What's the ratio of online and hybrid and versus face-to-face across the nation and around the world too? And so there are budget implications to that. So right now, if we move and we say we're moving from 15% online to permanently 60% online, then that means I'm going to need a lot more staff and a lot more resources. And I need to be able to budget for that. So I need to know institutionally what's happening in terms of the strategic plan and the strategic enrollment management plan in order to be able to budget accurately and forecast the types of technology I'm going to need for scale up and the type of resources, for example, human resources.
Yeah, and that's basically where I am too, as getting involved with the strategic management, same things, our enrollment management, taking on a bigger role, working with them. But I would also say that we, with the budgeting, we have to make our case, and we have to really look at the data. So again, that's kind of where we are right now, is collecting the data to show, it's kind of interesting, but showing, is there a differential? Is online, are the looking just at DFW and even grade point average? These are not perfect measures. Really hoping to get into some of the student surveys and so forth. We are finding that, yeah, we do have a higher DFW rate with a lot of our online courses. Sometimes it's not significant, especially at graduate level, not significant at all. It's very significant at the freshman level. And we know those are problematic courses that we have there. So I think in the past, I was afraid to make that case because it was the wrong story to tell. It would just be people saying, see, online's no good, it doesn't work. I think we're past that now. And so now I can actually use that data to say, so we know online works, but look, we can make this better, right? So I think that that's part of the financing of that, because you can then get down into some numbers of, we know how many courses, we know how many instructors, we know now we have all the project management in place to know how long this takes, right? So we can do those calculations. We couldn't early on when we didn't have the data, but I think now we're actually getting to that point, and that's kind of exactly the stage we're at. So.
And I'm going to pick up on that a little bit, just in terms of collecting data and using data. Data is going to be one of your best friends in this effort. Everything from, you've created an LMS template, you know that it helps faculty get off to a great start, and yet you're still having a lot of trouble convincing them that it's going to be helpful. Collect data on it. You could, for example, look at the help tickets that are going into your IT desk. Have they been reduced for courses that are using the template? Collect anecdotal and qualitative data from your faculty who are using the template. Did they find it easier to design their course within it? Do they have reduced questions about students, from students that are not about the content of the course? collect data in terms of staffing and structure. So if you know that you need to advocate for additional positions like additional instructional designers, look at the ratio already of the number of courses you're serving and the number of faculty that you're serving. Look at how many hours your instructional designers are spending. So run the numbers. And then when you invest time in courses to create quality, look at how well those courses do. And that means a lot more than just looking at final grades. So like was said here, data is just telling you a story. Data is not a number. It's not just a number point. It tells a story. If you see higher DFW rates for an online course and it's a freshman course, that doesn't necessarily mean that that course shouldn't be online. Those could be issues of student preparation and readiness. And that gives you data for, do we have an online student orientation? Those could cue you into design issues. Those could also cue you into faculty professional development needs, right? So a lot of data is there to help you. It is your friend. Make sure that you understand the story that it's telling so that you could share that story with others and get increased support for your work. So with that, we are at the end of our time. I want to thank our panelists so much. Thank you. And thanks to all of you for attending this session, and for those of you at home as well. And I hope you have a great rest of the conference. Bye.
Thank you. It's good. We were just like thinking the same thing.
Wonderful job. Wonderful job.
Did you appreciate the curveball? Yeah. I just came up with it right up there, so.